is distributed to this one, small memory is given, small memory is. So they will work independently without affecting its main memory, because we have this is just like working like a parallel operating systems. So that is what we have seen in the case of this particular scenario. So here that there are two things you have to understand, that in the case of a virtual machine there are two modes of operations. That is very important component for us to stress. Now what are these two important mode of the operation? One is we termed it as a user mode, and another is we termed it as a kernel mode. So anything which is operating under this particular sections, this is known as a kernel mode, and this one is known as a user mode. So this is a physical hardware. This is a physical hardware, and this hardware is a base, and here we are this processor is running, let us take that Linux. This is we are running a Ubuntu, and here we are running a Fedora. So this different operating system is running. So we need two parameter. One is a kernel mode, and what is the user mode? It does is that based on the user applications, the processor will try to share its requirement with the virtual memory. And in the virtual memory, what it does is the virtual memory one will interact with the kernel. Kernel is the main components which is trying to manage the resources. So this is managing resources. So our requirement under the Linux operating system is that, let us take that we are running a particular applications related to the Linux programming. If that particular program has to take place, that is a user's requirement, and that one needs immediate communications with its own memory and virtual requesting for the hardware to respond. So the user mode will respond to the kernel mode, which is a virtual machine implementation. This kernel mode is interacting. I can put it in another pictorial way, is like this one is the user VM virtual machine implementation, then kernel mode and hardware. Let us take it like this one. Now here what happened, the user is requesting, so virtual memory is also having a kernel. It is also having a kernel, separate kernel. So this kernel will manage the virtual machine's memory, and this one will interact with the virtual machine interface, which is already having a kernel mode, mode. So this kernel is also associated with this particular case. So in the virtual machines realizations, this kernel mode will try to respond to the user's requirements, which is in the user mode requirement, and thereby this is going to manage the hardware. This is going to manage the software, because hardware is common, but a part of the hardware in terms of a memory is being managed by the virtual machines and the kernel. But the virtual machines, in the virtual machines one, it will not directly interact with the hardware. This will only interact with the hardware, but this is requesting to the kernel mode, because this is a user mode. The user mode cannot directly go to the hardware. The user mode is requesting to the kernel mode, and the kernel mode is what interacting. So again, a separation is there. If you see this one, the CPU here is not directly, this is a user mode. This user mode is not directly interacting with the hardware. What is doing? It is interacting with this is a kernel mode, this is a user mode. This user mode directly is not doing any direct interaction with that. It interact with kernel mode. Kernel mode interact with the hardware. Same thing is what you are saying. Here the user mode is interacting with the kernel mode, and that is what we have seen. This particular section is a user mode. This user mode is interacting with the kernel mode, and the kernel mode is interacting with the hardware. So this is what exactly means in the case of a virtual machine. And the what is the advantage part of this one is that in the case of virtual machines, we try to see that the advantage part of the virtual machine, if we look across, it is that it is the first part is that virtual machine is isolated from other virtual machine. If you try to see, this is a virtual machines 1. Here the virtual machine 1 is there. This is not directly interacting with it. So there is a separation is being given. So that is the first part is that. And the other part we try to see is this one is that each virtual machines have the area of the disk called as a mini disk. So virtual machines have the area of the disk, that is a portion we call it as a mini disk. And the third is that the resources used by the virtual machine is isolated. That means if VM1, VM2, VM3 all resources is isolated. That is it. So this particular things is the part of the virtual machine. And if you want to do over your system this particular technique, then you can go through the software. There are some software we are using. One is VM, where this is basically a Dell subsidiary, and another is virtual box. This is a open source, free open source, and this is supported by Oracle corporations. So these are some of the things. One more point which before I conclude, I just want to say like this one is that user mode, remember, it is a applications mode, and kernel mode, it is a system call mode. So this is what we are using in virtual machines. Thank you.